So this is the basics of Green Built Homes, and it's, I feel like it's, you're not going to learn everything that happens and everything you should do today, but this is going to give you a good broad overview. As for the why, and maybe for me specifically, I was a production builder in Atlanta, and I built homes, and my role evolved into a warranty manager. And every problem we ran into, there was a solution for it. Usually the problem was poor construction. I mean, straight up, we were building houses 90 to 160 days. We were calling them customized. And we hired a company called South-based Energy Institute, which was a nonprofit, now just known as South-based. And they did audits, and some of the problems we did, a lot of pipe freezing, a lot of just envelope issues, whether it's insulation or air sealing. A lot of the issues we had came from just faulty workmanship in HVAC. And I realized that there was kind of a missing link there. And I was, this is 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to, didn't have any kids, didn't have a mortgage, and I went to work for them as a nonprofit and helped develop a program called Earthcraft House, which is a green building program that Green Built Homes is kind of modeled after initially. And we've kind of done our own thing. We're kind of focused on our region as well as expanding into the state. But in a nutshell, it's a program focused on performance and then resource efficiency and water efficiency and stuff like that. So let's kind of dive in. The Green Built Alliance was founded in 2001. It's a member-supported organization, and if you're not a member, and most of you guys are members, I recognize a lot of people here. It's very inexpensive as a company. It's like $150, and if you want to look at all the different levels, it's right here in the brochure you guys have in front of you, so you can look at this later or join. I recommend getting involved, and it's a great way for businesses to meet other builders in the industry and just kind of stay in tap with what's going on in Asheville. I find Asheville as a niche is, in town especially, we're not leveling up as a construction company because we're green builders. Everybody we build with or compete with, are green builders. So I feel like kind of just goes hand in hand with the industry. So please get involved. Some specifics, we are a resource center. We have a hotline, so as a realtor or an agent, you could refer clients or potential clients or people that are driving you crazy with questions about green building and you want to just pass them off. It's a great opportunity, also a good benefit. Give them a call or send us an email. We have our annual directory where we feature all our builders and trades and partners, and we have a great directory in the back, and we also have articles, and I highly recommend you have an article of interest, start working on this year so you can get it for next year's directory. In addition to just the Green Built program here, we also work with raters locally for LEED for Homes. So we do LEED for Home certification. We have the Green Gauge program, which is a program for basically auditing an existing home and determining a pathway for improvement. So that helps with like a renovation contractor who wants direction. That's a good opportunity to take advantage of a third party to help guide you down that road. We're also doing Appalachian offsets, a carbon offset program. So basically, either you as a company or you as an individual can use a tool to determine what your carbon footprint is, whether it's your office's footprint or your lifestyle. And we will do local projects, for example, Isaac Dixon, the solar panel project, using those other projects to give you offset credit. So basically, you're buying into a local impact for sustainability. So it's not just buying credits towards some solar companies out in California. You're actually impacting the local area, so it's pretty awesome. Do you want to tell us in a nutshell about Blue Horizons?
Sure. It was born under the Energy Innovation Task Force, which is a collaboration between the City of Asheville, Buncombe County, Duke Energy, and local business leaders. And it has a goal of creating Western North Carolina's clean energy future and avoiding the construction of new power plants and supply lines by way of energy efficiency. So it's about educating people about the energy efficiency resources in our community that already exist and developing new initiatives in partnership. Encourage you to check us out, bluehorizonsproject.com.
So, raise your hand if you don't mind, and just, why is green building important for you? Does anybody have an answer? Go right ahead.
Well, climate change.
Right, yeah. Whether you believe in climate change or not, or why it's happening, regardless, it's happening. So that's a great reason. Anybody else?
Healthy interiors.
Yeah, a good living environment, whether it's commercial, whether it's where you're working or at home, having healthy, fresh air to breathe while you're living in your house. And I have 3 4-year-olds, so indoor air quality is a big deal around our house. So yeah, I like to throw that in. Keep moving.
Put a picture of them right there.
Yeah, next time I do a presentation, my why is really, my 3 kids. Definitely for our next generation, but I mean, it's important. So, the electricity here is produced by coal power. Not the cleanest. In fact, we have a very dirty coal system here. We spend 90% of our time indoors, which I don't know where that statistic's from, but it's probably true. I like to think I don't, but I think about, especially lately with the weather, I'm in the office all the time. When you're at home, you're sleeping, hopefully 8 hours a day, give or take. Most homes in general, especially older homes, but even new construction, even at current code standards, most homes cut energy by 20 to 30%. So that's significant. For example, the light bulbs in here are, 75 watts a piece, 65 watts a piece. Just in this room, I can't do the math real quick, somebody can do it on a calculator, but these are the equivalent of a 65 watt bulb is like a 14 watt LED or even less. Yes.
These would probably be 10 watt.
Yeah, so 10 watt LEDs, so you can imagine one of these bulbs is equivalent to the 6 in here, not harping on the HVA.
Well, we'll get you some light bulbs.
Yeah.
We got project right here.
We'll bring it back.
And the reality is, buildings are super energy intensive. Just concrete alone is a high energy consumer. You don't think about it, but man, the heat and the time it makes and getting the gravel out of the quarry, the whole process, super energy intensive.
It's about 10 to 12% of the total carbon per year. It's just concrete production.
Wow.
Percent of what
The total carbon that's emitted every year.
comes from concrete manufacturing?
In the world. In the world.
Yeah.
So he's my stat maker. I'm terrible at stats. But and he knows concrete because the 2 of us with 7 other people moved a concrete hearth. It was 12 feet long or 14? 12?
12 by 14.
12 by 4 feet, 350 pounds into a house last week right before the snow. He knows concrete, and we didn't break it. Yes, sir.
We don't use concrete.
Sweet. Yeah. So in 2015 and 2016, those are the hottest years on record. Just with extreme heat comes extreme cold, so it's a cycle. I don't think it's changing anytime soon. 400,000 people died from climate-related deaths in 2014. That's pretty significant. 260 billion for cost of extreme-related events in 2017. I don't know if that's nationally or if that's across the country. Carrie, do you know where that stat came from?
It was from the U.S. Green Building Council, so I'm guessing it's national.
Just national. That seems more localized. But that's a lot of money.
And those are tax dollars.
Right. And then, just getting the resources here. Steel, for example, it's mined or it's quarried or it's refabricated, it's recycled, but it's not. It's transportation all costs of time and energy. So we want to build buildings that are going to be here for a while, and if they're going to be here for a while, we want people who are living in them or using them to be comfortable and healthy. So the code defines the worst house allowable by law. So, my house meets code. It's like, great. Your house is the least worst possible house you can build. It's like, that's your starting point. And that's, at JAG, for example, our baseline is NC Green Built and Energy Star. And then there's room to go up from there. So it's like, I think we're setting the bar low if you say, yeah, we meet code, sure. And for those of you who are builders and work with the inspectors, sometimes the relationship with the builder is more important than enforcement. So it's kind of like, so how often are you even meeting the bare minimum? So what's nice about this program is there is third party auditing inspections at three stages at minimum. Yeah. So we've got, and we'll get more into that, but basically you're going to get inspection of framing before installation, after installation, and then a final inspection with all the diagnostic testing that we'll get into a little bit more deeply. So the local codes, really what do they represent? They're more like development ordinances. So, Asheville doesn't have more stringent codes per se than the national standard. Buncombe County has a code of ordinances, and 90% of it's relating to zoning and what you can build or cannot build, stream buffers and stuff like that. It's not telling you that you have to caulk your bottom plates and do a number of things that again are intrinsic to building a good home. And
Before we go on,
go
one
ahead.
other point I like to make about the code is the above code programs like Green Built become a test bed for code. So for those of you who've been doing green building for a while, you'll start to notice that things you've been having to do for Green Built end up in the code eventually. So doing an above code program like this is a great way to get practice and to get ready for what's coming in the code.
And hopefully it's not something coming into code that requires you to put more framing in walls, which is just recently happened. So what is exactly green building? Is this the kind of house we build here in Asheville? I'm sure it's very green in color. It's probably very temperature neutral maybe inside. It's probably high in mold content, moisture, and other things. But it doesn't have to look like. This is another great example of a green build. It's got a lot of green around it. This might be a LEED certified building somewhere. It looks like something from a space movie. Maybe it's a green building. I'm not sure. But this is a house, and we couldn't figure out where we built it. But this is a house we build all the time. This general plan because it's super efficient. And if it's efficient from a design standpoint, from an energy standpoint, it's also cost efficient. So a couple things I want to point out about this plan. I call it the Davenport because it kind of started with the development we did Davenport Park. But it's a very minimal footprint, about 800 to 900 square feet. The second floor is bonus room trusses. So instead of a second floor and attic, which you could play racquetball in, which was a lot like the houses I used to build in Atlanta, was a big two-story house. And then for the elevations to look right, let's add a whole another story of attic. So it's got high roof pitches and lots of room for storing whatever, or lots of empty space for bypasses and failure points and knee walls and the kind of things we avoid. So the bedrooms upstairs, there's 2 bedrooms, and in these bedrooms we're insulating the roof line. And there's very little, other than the knee walls, there's very little unused space, and the knee walls actually act as very, very good space for built-in nooks or something like that. So, and we build up, especially in Asheville. We're always building on steep slopes anyway, so it's kind of by default. If you want X amount of square footage, you got to build up. But so you've got 900 square feet, maybe 900 square feet, 900 square feet, give or take 600 square feet up. You've got a significantly high size house up to 2,500 square feet. On a very minimal footprint and very little wasted space, so again, it looks like any maybe craftsman bungalow you could build.
It's also passive solar.
Yeah, well, this one
So you can see the shadows on the side.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just it looks like a normal house, but it does have more windows on the south, and the way the overhangs and the shadows work, you get a passive solar effect. It's also, I think, probably got a conditioned basement with superior walls, so that gives you a really well insulated foundation wall. And because it's half below ground, you don't get a lot of energy loss on that lower level.
Is everybody familiar with the superior wall system? So, for those of you shaking your head no, just in a nutshell, so a superior wall is a precast concrete wall that's actually made in a plant and manufacturing. And what better controlled environment if you're going to use one of the most energy intensive products? Why wouldn't you want it built in a controlled environment? So what's nice about these walls is you got 2 inches of continuous concrete. It's 5,000 psi, so by design it's waterproof. And then structurally it's a bunch of integrated kind of I-beams, steel. And then behind that 2 inches of concrete is 2 inches of continuous foam. So that's a R11. So in the wall system itself, it already meets code. And then you've got cavities in there, and in those cavities you can put up to an R19 batt insulation. So your basement wall system could be an effective nearly a R30. So it's more like a 25, I think, how it rates out with the continuous take, depending on the quality, installation, contact, etc. What's also nice about these, talk about efficiency in construction, not just for energy efficiency, but it's a ready system with conduit chases integrated in, so you can wire these walls out, drywall right to them, so you're not adding the labor and time of another layer of framing that you're going to have to build that's material intensive. So we try to use this wherever applicable. Some sites, obviously, high hickories, when you mentioned that development, there's not a lot of steep sites up there where you could use a superior wall foundation. They work great in town and in for a lot. So. Something else to point out too, if you can see it in the back here, but there's a little module here, and what looks like, it actually looks like a downspout, but so we must have tested this house for radon because we're in the program, and the test failed for radon, and we added a active radon vent system, so there's actually an active fan in there that's drawing sub-slab soil gases, which is by default, kind of a good thing to do. It's like, well, maybe there's not radon in my house, but there might be a lot of high moisture content or something else in the soil. So it's passively taking that moisture out from underneath the slab. So it's another way to control comfort in the house and reduce the chances for mold and stuff like that. What are the benefits of green building? We've kind of tapped on them a little bit, but they're obviously healthier. If you basically, what I like to tell people is, we're gonna build an environmental ice cream sandwich. We're gonna build it tight and ventilate it right. It's super simple. It's easy to remember, but if you're talking to a client or somebody like that, that's an easy way to put it. It's like, we're gonna build your house as tight as possible. Then we're gonna control where the ventilation comes from. That's a good system. We're not gonna build a leaky house and say, hey, you get fresh air from wherever. How fresh is it from wherever? How much moisture is coming in with that air, and where's the moisture coming from? So. Build it tight, ventilate it right. Obviously, a house with good indoor air quality is going to be more comfortable. You're not going to have as many, like in the winter, as much dryness. There's different types of ventilation. We talk about ventilation all day long, it seems like. And Amy or I can get into later exactly what your options are for ventilation. And then what most people think about, sure, I'm going to save money on my energy bills, which is significant. If you're spending less on energy, you can spend more on paying down your mortgage or for trips to the hands-on museum in Hendersonville with your kids, whatever you do.
And actually, I could just add, if anyone is building a certified home, there is a report that I can generate for you that gives you the estimated savings, and appraisers are allowed to consider that in their appraisal, and they're also allowed to add that savings to the home buyer's income. So if you're having trouble getting an appraisal where it needs to be, or getting somebody's income where it needs to be, but you're close, call me and we can get you something.
Yeah, on the fringe of getting your loan, that's a good opportunity to take advantage of that. And then, probably the number one reason JAG does green certification and third-party testing, aside from the rebates, but really is durability, it's quality. So whenever a client, if ever I'm doing a sales meeting with a potential buyer or potential design build consult, I tell them, hey, this is our baseline, and this is, if we know we can build something better, and it means your quality's going to improve, then we're going to do it. We're not going to lower our standards so you can upgrade your granite countertops. So it's and for us it's less warranty calls. We have a part-time warranty guy. We build 25, 30 homes a year, and he does all our cabinet installs, and he does our warranty, because our warranty after 1 year is generally pretty low. Because we're not dealing with a lot of issues like frozen pipes and mold and stuff like that, because we're trying to eliminate them on the front end, which is building green. But it's actually building a higher quality home. So that's number one. I say take your mind off the green and just think about quality, because that's what we're talking about. So, and then safety. I guess from if you have gas appliances, there's some safety benefits from some of the way we do things. But I think the codes kind of cover safety pretty well for the most part. Can you think of any ways safety really specific?
It probably is combustion.
Combustion safety, yeah.
We do have a fair number of code compliant homes that have drought problems in fireplaces that, if you listen to Green Built, will typically be resolved.
Backdrafting from gigantic range hoods.
Backdrafting from gigantic range hoods. Matt, can you think of anything?
We've never done this before. Reduce construction and demolition waste. So something we do is we can't send all our wood waste to the stump dump to be ground and turned into mulch and used back on our site. But any wood that's not pressure treated or doesn't have a laminate or veneer or film on it can all be ground and used for mulch. So we actually have a separate pile for wood waste. That means we're not spending money to send our end cuts to the landfill. And then they just stay at the landfill. We actually send them, they get ground. Sometimes they get ground on site. There are companies that will do site waste grinding. They have a machine that will literally pull the nails out as they're grinding. So it's not just wood cuts that are short. It's all wood waste that's not green, laminated, or has a veneer on the film. So that's a pretty nice benefit. So and if you need mulch on site, often we do, especially this time of year. It's a great way to use it. It's not free at the stump dump, but it's less expensive than sending that same wood to the dump. So there's other ways that we reduce construction demolition waste. We'll get into some advanced frame techniques. And then just everybody should care about the environment. Everybody likes their house and trees. Go ahead.
So are you sending that to stump dump?
We are. Yep. And it's still less expensive than filling up the dumpster with it. So, what are the goals? Why certify? I've heard builders specifically say, or I've heard potential clients tell me that, oh, they do this, they just don't certify it. And it's significantly different between saying you do something and then actually having a third party come in and prove that you're doing it. And it doesn't matter how often you do it. I've been building for 20 years. I've been involved in green building for 15. And Amy came out to my house last week. It's a simple house. I had a new framer who worked on the house. His sub, that was for, not a sub, but the crew that was framing that house wasn't the same crew that was framing the house I was working on. I assume they'd been trained. And we found 20, maybe not 20, but we found a lot of places where wood was overused that we could have caught on the front end. That those guys will get right next time, but it's there's always a benefit to third-party inspections. And again, looking at warranty, thinking about quality callbacks. If some trade is up in your attic, cuts a hole in a supply boot or a return and is sucking loose fill attic insulation right into your system, all these things I've seen. I did probably a few hundred inspections back when I was in Atlanta with South Face, and Amy's done a few hundred more. But the things that other trades can do to other trades' work. So the same trades that's had a bad day might take it out. It's incredible what you can find out by just getting somebody else to look at something a different way. And the more eyes you can have on your job, the better.
And the testing, the air tightness testing of ducts and homes, you don't know that your building is tighter unless you're testing.
Period.
You just don't.
Another goal is, we do, it says goals of building home certified builder education, but, so they're all different levels. So if you want some differentiation among the green builders in the market, aim for the stars. If your clients allow you to, our typical homes are usually between silver, gold, and then I guess we just did a platinum and a platinum net zero. But, generally, we educate our clients about solar and geothermal for heating and cooling, but, we're not throwing that in. And then there's also some houses, for example, that the site is, you have no solar window, so you can't take advantage, you can't take passive solar for south-facing orientation and lighting, and you can't do solar, so there's just some sites that limit you in those type of expansion categories. So. And then some site, if you have a small footprint and a 5,000 square foot site, and you're also trying to get maybe waste management, you're trying to do a septic system, something like that, you don't have room to do a geothermal in-ground loop system where you can't drill 200 feet to do a vertical system. So there are limitations, but a certified home is, with minimal education and minimal like changing the way you do things, unless you're doing things terribly wrong, it's very achievable, and it's a matter of just kind of stepping back and looking at it through fresh set eyes. And it's been proven, there have been studies that they are more marketable. Somebody who might not be into green building, look at two different houses, one's certified, and they know it's going to be 25 to 30% more efficient. They're going to pick, of like situations, they're going to pick the house that's more efficient. And they're going to make the assumption the builder is a better builder for doing this. So, you had a question?
What about the cost difference between, like, your traditional green?
So, from a framing standpoint, we're spending less than 5% more, if not nothing more, than a house that's typically framed. So, we frame 2x6, 2 foot on center on the outside walls, because the more framing, the more thermal bridging, the less insulation. Basically, the more insulation you get in the walls, the better. If you go to a 2x6 wall instead of a 2x4 wall that's on 16 in the center, you're going to get more insulation. You're going to have the same structure. So that's one thing we do. We also upgrade our framing materials to basically a choice, a framer series, a more choice southern yellow pine material. And there's going to be, we see the benefit because our framers, they're coaling less, so they're spending less time going through the wood or less time putting bad wood into the house and more time just getting to work. The cold material, the framer series, actually tells you which way, the curve is if it's got any, and it allows. So we're spending very little more from that standpoint. Another thing we'll get into in a little bit are some of the programs, but by going electric and using geothermal, not geothermal, but using heat pump water heaters, and heat pump furnaces, there's some programs with incentives that kind of help pay you back for some of the additional costs. So,
yeah, I would say you can get to certified or silver level without spending much additional.
Less than 5%.
If you make the right choices. To get enough points for gold and platinum and net zero, I don't know if we've maybe had 1 or 2 platinum homes that didn't have solar, but most platinum homes are going to have solar on them. Once you get into the gold and platinum levels, you're making some choices that do add cost. But it's like anything else. When Matt and I built our house 7 years ago, we wanted to definitively answer this question of how much more does it cost. And what we realized is it's just an unanswerable question. Because for almost any decision, you can find cheap ways to do it and expensive ways to do it. And a lot of the ways that people make those decisions aren't just entirely based on cost, they're based on preference or perception. So even for us, and we're very experienced with this, how we made those decisions, there are a few of them where I can say, well, we didn't make the cheapest decision. And you could make the cheaper decision and get similar performance, but we chose not to. So it's hard to answer that question of how much more it costs. But just to get to a certified or silver level, as Rob says, if you compare a 2x4 wall with a 2x6 wall, going from 2x4 16 on center to 2x6 24 on center is about a wash for wood. It might blow your mind to know this, but the R15 bats that code requires you to put in a 2x4 wall actually cost more than an R19 bat that goes in a 2x6 wall, because they're denser and they cost more to make.
So specifically to the administration cost, the fee for a single family house is $275 for members. And I explained earlier in the brochures in front of you that a membership's $150. So if you're certifying more than a few houses, it just makes common sense. And again, I think it's important to be a part of what we do. So the fee to the Green Built Alliance, which is just an admin fee, is $275, and that's for the auditing that goes into that stage of it. And then the inspection fee to the raters for quality control, Amy and I were just talking about this. Basically, for a 2,000 square foot home, we add up to, it was 1,000, right? Basically, or 1,200 roughly.
Depending exactly which programs you do, to do Green Built, and if it would be around 1,000. If you also do Energy Star, it would be 1,300.
Yeah, so on top of 275, to get the third-party verifications, NC Green Built, Energy Star, what was there?
The Hero rebate.
The Hero rebate,
Yeah, we add 100 to process the rebate that we're going to tell you about in a couple slides, but you get money for that, so it's worth it.
And then again, to your question, kind of, this says, by level and kind of starting point for 1 to 3% of the average with advantages for long-term savings, blah, blah, blah. I think Amy's kind of right. I mean, it's clear maybe in framing, but all the other levels, it's going to vary. So, and that's kind of client-driven, and then as a builder, it's kind of your value point. But putting a percentage on is probably right. I think we're spending, if you could compare our house to a code house, we're probably spending 5% more or less.
There was a local realtor who did a study of locally listed Green Built homes. It was during the recession, actually. And they found a noticeable difference in days on the market for Green Built homes. They were on the market less days, and the selling price also in comparable neighborhoods did seem to be up to 10% higher. So I think the Green Built Alliance actually has those numbers, but somebody did a market analysis, and there are definite concrete selling advantages.
And one of the other things that I brought up with people is when they look at additional costs to build a home for doing various improvements, the thing to look at isn't so much the actual cost of the additions, it's how much are you spending per month to finance those improvements. So when we talk to homeowners about, hey, let's say I want to do these particular upgrades that are more than I'm comfortable with, the way to look at it is, if you're doing a 30-year mortgage and you've improved your energy usage in the house to where what you're adding to your mortgage to do the improvements is far outweighed in a lot of instances by what your utility bill goes down per month, you a lot of times are ending up with a net positive even though you're spending additional money on the house. So we try and explain to people, you can't just look at it as how much money am I spending additionally to build the house. You have to look at it as what am I spending per month. Because a lot of times those improvements make a lot more sense when you look at it the way you're actually spending money.
So to date, well over 1,600 homes have been certified, and probably almost all of those have been in Western North Carolina. We had was it a condominium development or a townhome that was in Charlotte?
Yeah, I believe it was condominiums.
Is that 50 homes? Or?
I'm not sure the exact numbers on it, but we have done the statewide, but the bulk are in this area.
So that's in Western North Carolina. That's pretty exciting. This is an actual house we just certified. So you get this certificate, which is very tangible, but it really it means a lot, and it's just proof of what you've accomplished. So financial incentives. So when we again market to a custom home client and go through the budget proposal on a job, we actually don't bill our client for any of Amy's time, any of the rater's time, any of the certifications, period, and we never do. That's because thanks to this current rebate in place through Duke Energy, on even our smallest houses, we're getting about $2,000 a home back, which covers all the costs of certification. Our average is probably $4,000 if you look at our custom homes, and you can get up to $9,000. And unfortunately, it's a Duke Energy project, so program. The more energy you use efficiently, the more rebates you're going to get. And probably the biggest rebate and bang for your buck is a heat pump water heater, and you're getting about $1,200 for a heat pump water heater as part of this Duke Energy Progress program. And heat pump water heater is going to cost you, an 80 gallon is going to cost you $1,800, I think is where they're at right now, about $1,800. That's
A 50 is probably 1,000 or 1,200.
yeah. 50, oh yeah, so yeah.
It can about pay for the water heater if you roll it into the whole house rebate. These two rebates are either or.
Yeah, so you can't do both.
So you can't do both. It's in a new house, you're way better off to do a whole house rebate. The equipment only are nice for existing homes, renovations, or people who forgot to call us to do the whole house rebate until the end. But you can see the $350 that you get for a heat pump water heater and the equipment only is a lot less than that equipment would add to your whole house rebate with calculated savings.
So, I mean, if you're a builder and you know there's a program out there that's going to pay for the certification process, that's going to give you third-party quality control and a certificate you can give your client at the end, and know that your house is at least 30% more efficient than standard construction. It seems like a slam dunk, and we don't see this fading anytime soon. So hopefully we stay on that path. There are currently there's an incentive for 30% federal for solar tax, a true credit, and that's our geothermal heat pump and wind power. I don't see a lot of wind power in Asheville, but if anything, it's not going to go away. They may stage it back, so it's 30% now, may go to 25%.
I think it goes to 22% after 2019, and there's a schedule for it stepping down. But geothermal and solar are all grouped together.
So if you're encouraging your clients to do solar, this is a good push to say, hey, get it on schedule now, so we can lock in the federal tax credit. So, and then City of Asheville, if you're Green Built and Energy Star certified, you actually get a $100 rebate. So that helps.
That's for each.
Yep.
So you can get up to 200.
And then Black Mountain's really kind of steering the path at $500. So that's pretty cool. I didn't know they were 500.
Their permits are also twice the city of Asheville, so it's sort of, I think they're kind of helping.
Well, they got one inspector, so they got, he's got to get paid really well. And I'm gonna hand it over to Amy, and we'll keep going. But now we're gonna kind of dive into the nuts and bolts of what is green building, which we've kind of tapped on. So thank you. Thanks, guys. Yep.
Okay, so for those of you who know me, we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty here. And I'm going to try not to dive too deep, but if you have questions about specific things that you're here to learn about, just stop me, because we're actually doing pretty good on time.
Yeah.
So, the Green Built Homes program has some different categories that address the main criteria for a green building. So the first of these categories is sustainable sites. So the idea that you either have a site that is small and taking up a small footprint and is in town, so you're close to things and not spending a lot of money on transportation. You're also using drought-resistant plants so that you're not doing a lot of mowing or watering. If you're out in the country, perhaps not disturbing so much of your site and leaving it wild. So So some of our clients have very big multi-acre sites, but they only disturb a small portion of it. So there are a lot of ways that your site can be considered sustainable. The next category is water efficiency. So we know that both water and energy are important. And water efficiency is about, again, looking at how we can reduce water use for landscaping, and also how can we reduce our use of domestic water through low-flow fixtures, and I'll show you some examples. Energy efficiency. So there's a bunch of categories here. Energy is a really important part of green building. Often we talk about the two as though they're interchangeable, but these other categories do also matter. Envelope is just kind of a generic way we refer to the exterior insulated part of a house. So the floors, the walls, the windows, the roof, getting that airtight and insulated. HVAC, that stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So doing those things efficiently. Your domestic hot water, generating it efficiently, and then your appliances and the things that you plug in. Improved indoor air quality. So if a house has bad indoor air quality and it is unhealthy for its occupants, it's not a very good value as a house. We actually build houses to give us shelter and keep us warm and be healthy. So if it's failing at that, it's not going to last for very long. It's going to be a poor use of resources. And being sick is really not very environmentally friendly. So improved indoor air quality is a big part of green building. Sustainable resource use and materials, and I know there were a few people here who are working in this field, but just looking at the materials that we use and what embodied energy they have, how far away they come from, how they're using resources is important. I'm going to dive into each of these little subcategories with some examples. Site work and selection is kind of the first. So some of the things, so the way that Green Built is structured then is it has a checklist, and there are some things you have to do. And then in each of these categories, there's a list of things that you can do that are optional that you get points for. And it's the number of points that you get that determine whether you're certified or silver or gold or platinum. So some of the things that you can earn points for in the site work category are ways to minimize impact. So fencing off of big trees so that people don't park on top of them and kill the tree. Fencing off entire portions of the site to remain wild. Using a really small infill lot that's in the city that may not have had a lot of big trees on it to begin with, and where your occupants can take a bus to work or walk to work, or at least not drive very far to work. Saving topsoil, so pulling your topsoil into a pile and then putting it back so that you're leaving people with good soil. I said protecting trees. Erosion and stormwater. This is something that probably everybody who lives in Asheville, and I think as I talk to people, those of us who are in the industry are more sensitive to it than others. But you've probably seen new construction projects and you drive past in the rain and there's a bunch of soil out in the road, the silt fences aren't working properly. So having a plan for that and actually getting your silt fences up and working properly and reinforcing with straw bales so that we don't have soil erosion and so that we don't dump a bunch of crap into our stormwater systems is a good thing to do. Using native and drought-resistant plants. So just being aware that non-native plants can sometimes proliferate in our environment in ways that we don't like. And plants that are native or designed to be drought-resistant won't need to be watered, so they're going to use less resources, over the long haul. And if you're not using a lot of grass, you might notice a lot of Green Built homes have a more mulch-intensive landscape, or they might have like a non-mowable grass, like that's just designed to get a little higher and stay more like a field. People aren't having to mow that, which uses resources. They're not having to water it. Yeah.
Do you have a list of the plants that are...
Yes. So she asked if we have a list of the plants. The Green Built worksheet is actually, it's like an 8-page checklist, and there are, points for all of these things. And if you can go online at the Green Built Alliance and download that checklist, and it actually has hyperlinks wherever more information is appropriate, or it'll have little notes about where to go for information embedded in that. It's an Excel checklist. So there are some organizations that have lists of native and drought-resistant plants. You can just go to that checklist, and it'll link you to the appropriate resources. Infill development, I mentioned, is actually one of the greenest things you can do is to just use a smaller footprint and keep people closer to a lot of stuff. So there's actually a point on the checklist where we do a thing called a walk score, where I've got an app on my phone, and when I'm at your house, I just pull the app up and say, what's my walk score right here? And it'll give me a score from 0 to 100 of how walkable the neighborhood is. So and 70 is a pretty good score for Asheville. So if you get a walk score of 70, that means you're close to a lot of variety of things. So grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, libraries, a bus stop. So a variety of things. If you get a low walk score, you're probably out in the country or deeply embedded in a neighborhood that's only residential, so you're not close to things. And then finally, clustered development. So one thing that I have noticed is really common with local developments is they'll have a preserve area that is not ever going to get developed, and then they'll have clusters of more dense development. So I know we have someone here from Crest Mountain. They have a thing called the Villages at Crest Mountain, where they're actually really small lots. So your actual building lot is quite small, but then in the middle of it, they have this community garden area that everyone can share. And I think they also have some kind of preserve areas that are on the fringes of that development, where we're keeping some of the wild and natural resources because we're clustering people. And a lot of the local developments have something like that. I know Southcliff has that sort of thing where they have their little village where the lot's pretty small, but then they've got trails and preserve. So those are some of the ways you can earn points in site work. The next category is water efficiency. So I just have some pictures. I have some things that I like and some things that I don't like. The rain head shower head is something that frustrates me. As you may have noticed, I have really long hair. If I can rinse my hair with a low flow shower head, everyone can. And I actually was just having this conversation with a builder the other day because they said homeowners have this idea that they need a lot of gallons per minute to get clean in the shower. And in reality, when I travel, if I have to go somewhere with high flow fixtures, I actually don't like to wash my hair there because the low flow fixtures achieve low flow by building up more pressure in the fixture. So you actually get a higher pressure wash, and it is actually easier to rinse out my very long hair. So these rain heads kind of look pretty and people like the idea of them, but they're not particularly forceful, so they're not great for rinsing. And they also, because they use so much water, they aerosolize a lot of steam. So a lot of homes that I do work on where the homeowners insist on using something like that, you'll start to get window condensation in the wintertime because their houses are actually getting so humid because they're using this high flow fixture. So using low flow efficient fixtures is important. Shower heads matter the most because you're wasting both water and energy. Showering uses a high percentage of the hot water that most homes use. So if you can, a standard shower head is probably 2 to 2.5 gallons per minute. Some of these rain heads can go up to 4 gallons per minute, so they're very wasteful. A low flow shower head is like 1.75, or they even make 1.5 gallons per minute. So, you could be using 25-30% less hot water easily and not notice. And if you buy the right fixture, probably even get better performance. So that's a homeowner education item. And that's part of the benefit of this whole program is that it gives you a platform for educating homeowners. So, you can have a conversation with your homeowner where they talk about high flow fixtures, and you can kind of educate them that actually a low flow fixture might be better for your indoor humidity and actually perform just as well.
You still might lose that conversation.
You might lose that conversation, but it's really important to have that conversation.
It is. Yeah.
So there's a low flow shower head, which I like. This is a dual flush toilet. So you probably, around Asheville, there are a lot of dual flush toilets. You've probably seen toilets that have a high flush setting when you need it and a low flush setting when you don't. Those can be a nice way to save hot water. There's also, if we kind of go clockwise, there's a rain barrel. That's a way to collect the ample rain that we receive here in Asheville and use it for your landscaping. So we like dual flush. This WaterSense logo, if you're a builder, is a really important thing to be acquainted with. Plumbing fixtures have this logo on them if they are low flow. So the nice thing about that is you don't have to memorize what is a good flow rate for showers, what is a good flow rate for lavatory faucets. You don't have to remember that. What's a good flow rate for toilets? What you have to remember is this logo, and then look for plumbing fixtures that have this logo. And there are lots of choices. You can spend as much money as you want. There are also some affordable choices. But getting that WaterSense logo tells you that you're getting a truly certified low flow fixture.
That also means educating your designer, if you're working with an interior designer or a third-party design partner like Ferguson's. You want to remind whoever your rep is over there that, you know, we want to use low flow. Like we have, it seems like the more expensive, more money people spend on the fixtures, flowing fixtures specifically, the less efficient they are generally. And that doesn't always have to be the case, but if your designer does a little research on the front end, and they're really good in general at steering clients and you give them the budget. That helps. Again, it's not always the end all. And what I found is the worst scenario for these type of fixtures is when your client goes online and buys a fixture from China from a website. And there's no warranty on top of that, but there's no rating and no way to know what the rating is. They're not labeled, so that immediately it's going to take you out of this point category where you've got to get available points anyway. So steer your clients away from shopping for themselves in every situation generally, but especially with the fixtures online. And
Good luck.
there are high end fixtures that are efficient. Not where I've found rain head yet. It's very efficient.
There are some rain heads that aren't as bad as other rain heads. I know I've seen 2.5 gallons per minute. I may actually have seen 2 gallons per minute. So you just want to be careful with those. So I've got some pictures of stuff. I've got a little picture of drought-resistant landscaping, so maybe mixing it up with some mulch, some shrubbery, maybe less grass than you would normally have. Energy-efficient clothes washers also matter on both the water side and the energy side. Same thing with dishwashers. If you're going to have an irrigation system, having an irrigation system that can either use rainwater from, usually at that point, a cistern, because these rain barrels are great, especially for kind of a hobbyist, but if you're doing much landscape watering, if we get a dry spell, they don't last a long time. So I've got a 3,000 gallon cistern at my house that I flush toilets with and use for landscaping, and most of the time it's completely full and overflowing, but if we get a dry month, I can use the whole thing. I have used the whole thing.
I was actually just going to ask, I mean, personally, I think rain barrels are still on that borderline green washing kind of aspect, because in an area that is relatively water rich with the amount of rainfall that we get, when we do have a drought, you use them so quickly that it doesn't really make any big impact. And the embodied energy, especially the plastic rain barrels overall, has got to be far higher than any environmental improvement or reduction.
I think it just sort of depends how you use them. There are some recycled options for those, upcycle, and people who have, like I think the right way to look at a rain barrel is if you've got somebody on an infill lot in town who has a couple of raised beds for like vegetables, where they're actually going to water them pretty regularly, even during times when we're getting rain, then that's what you use it for, and you're gonna end up supplementing that with city water if it really doesn't rain for a month. I think that's the right way to look at rain barrels, but if you're serious about having an actual irrigation system and doing a lot with it, you need to be looking at probably 3,000 to 5,000 gallons of rain
50 gallon
cistern.
rain barrels out in
Yeah.
water.
And just as an aside on cheaper ways to do this, we have one builder who started using septic tanks as rain barrels. They're easier to get.
Food grade.
So if you're just building to code, you're going to get what's on this table, usually done with fiberglass insulation, with very few quality installation guidelines. So all insulation is really sensitive to how well it's installed. You're not going to get the rated performance out of it unless it's installed well. Fiberglass in particular is probably more vulnerable to poor installation than other insulations, although all insulations need to be installed correctly to work well. So one of the things that green building adds is we're looking at how well it's installed. And the codes have started to trickle some of this in. So for those of you who are builders, a few years ago they started requiring air barriers on fiberglass and cellulose. That's a how well it's installed issue, and that came from the green programs. We had been requiring that for 10 years, and it became such a thing. It became something that was pretty mainstream. It was pretty cost effective to do. Builders knew how to do it. You didn't need exotic supplies, so the code just adopted it.
How does that work?
How does what work?
The air barrier, I'm not.
Okay, so yeah, so fiberglass insulation is like a fleece jacket. So you know how if you're wearing a fleece jacket, you're pretty warm until you go out in the wind and then it doesn't do anything for you? Well, fiberglass insulation is the same thing. As soon as air blows into it, it stops working just like a fleece jacket does. So for fiberglass insulation to work properly, it has to be encased on all 6 sides with a hard surface. So normally you've got a stud cavity with 2 pieces of wood and a top and a bottom plate, and then you've got sheathing outside and drywall inside. They're all touching the fiberglass. And as long as that fiberglass is installed to fill the whole cavity and fluffed out, front to back, it's going to work pretty well. But sometimes you have these little cavities in houses that don't get drywall right up against the fiberglass. It happens behind bathtubs. It happens behind fireplaces. It happens under stairs in that little triangular area. And if you don't have a hard surface on the inside called an air barrier, that fiberglass doesn't work right. So we were always requiring that hard surface on the inside, and eventually code caught up to us. So now if you're a builder, you've got to do that. Enforcement in the code also varies. So I do on my inspections tag people for things that the code official should have tagged them for. And part of it is I have a different checklist, and I look for some additional things that they're not looking for yet. But I would say the 2 things on this checklist or on this chart that I most tag people for that the code official didn't is windows That solar heat gain coefficient on windows is something that code officials often don't look at, but should. And slabs. So there's a requirement to vertically cover the slab edge with insulation that is in the code that doesn't get done if you're not certifying. I'm just going to be realistic. I have yet to see a house that was not getting certified that actually had that detail done correctly. I am personally a fan of using spray foam where it makes a house more airtight and does things that other insulations don't do. I don't actually think that you need to fill your whole wall with it. It's not wrong or going to score badly, but I think I can give you more bang for the buck somewhere else, and we can get walls pretty airtight and we can make fiberglass products work.
There's a lot of waste from open cell foam, the low density, because
Yeah, if they have to scrape it,
you gotta scrape it off
there
the
can
walls.
be a lot of
Maybe
waste,
build a dumpster with it, so there's
which we don't want to do.
no.
Just doing high R values, so we talked already about going to 2x6 with R19, which actually doesn't really cost more than code, which is 2x4 with R15. People who do a vented attic with blown ceilings, code for that is R38, but going up to like an R50 if you have the space is a nice, really cost-effective upgrade. In floors, if you have a floor over an unconditioned space, a lot of times that's like a 2x10 structure or something. Going up to an R30 bat that will actually fit in the structure is actually probably going to get installed better and work better, but also not be a big cost upgrade. So just upping the R values, doing things to reduce the thermal bridging. So thermal bridging is the parts of your wall or ceiling that have structure in them where where there's no insulation. So basically like on a wall, the studs, or in a ceiling, the joists. That wood is more conductive than insulation. So everywhere you have wood, you're losing energy to the outside. So reducing that thermal bridging by doing advanced framing techniques where you can insulate the corners and the headers and the T-walls better. Using something like SIPS panels, which is the lower picture, a structural insulated panel, which is like a foam and plywood sandwich. ICFs, insulated concrete forms. Insulated exterior sheathing is getting more popular. So the product Zip Wall, the exterior sheathing from Zip, they make Zip Plus R, which has the foam built into it. So there's a lot of ways to reduce your thermal bridging, and they all help. Upgrading windows, which usually involves having the solar heat gain number either being higher or lower. Code is 0.30. If you go lower, you're letting in less of the solar heat that hits that window. If you've got big windows on the east or the west, it's probably a really good idea to do that. If you have south-facing windows with good overhangs so they don't take in too much energy during the summer, you actually might want to go high and let more of that solar in the wintertime. To do that, you need to get somebody to stamp something for you for the code official if they enforce the code on these windows, which they often don't. But that can be done. And then I mentioned the improved slab edge insulation detail. So making sure that insulation or heat doesn't leave through that edge of our slab.
And speaking to the window labels specifically, just to it doesn't fail once a year, twice a year, we're going to run this from. Those labels fall off for the windows by the time Amy's coming up to the house, or half the time when you get, I think, weather's part of it, but either get pictures of them on the windows installed, or get the specific labels. But the way this is enforced is it has to be the specific labels, or like a clear
Or
description.
just get us out right after
Yeah.
you install the windows. Like, you don't have to wait until you're calling in your county framing inspection. Just put the windows in and call us and we'll come out. You can't just save us one. Yeah.
So have y'all done any testing on the 2x6 advanced framing method versus the SIPs, say echo panels or something where they have insulated corners? Seems to me like a lot less.
We have.
virgin.
We have. Our house is built with SIPs, and we we did a number of energy models of the house comparing SIPs to advanced framing or advanced framing with continuous insulation. And what I'll tell you is when we present those results, the SIP manufacturers just, you can see them getting ready to murder us because we can usually show similar performance with things other than SIPs that are much easier to acquire and easier to construct. So there's no problem with SIPs, but the cost that we paid extra for SIPs, it took longer to put them in. The energy savings we got out of it, the payback was exorbitantly long. It was in centuries.
I've used some that I didn't like.
This is another one of those examples where you can make a choice where you spend more or less money. I think the less money but equivalent performance way is to do a frame wall and to put the insulated exterior sheathing on it. So you get rid of all the thermal bridging with that sheathing.
Does it matter, say using a slip versus just a standard OSB house or how do you look at that?
Okay, so that's a great question. Zip versus OSB and house wrap. What I usually tell builders, I have builders who love zip and I have builders who don't love zip. Yeah. If the house wrap is properly applied, there probably isn't a ton of difference. Where the rub comes in is a lot of house wrap is not properly applied, and in that case, I feel like zip is a little more forgiving of your install. So I think zip gets installed correctly more of the time. So I am a fan of the zip product, but I have clients who don't use it, and it's also fine.
One other question on the zip. I'm going to use it on everything we do, walls and roofs, but the coating is put on it. How healthy is it or environmental friendly is it?
I actually don't know the answer to that, but because the coating is on the outside, I think most of that would migrate, the off-gassing of it would migrate outside. Honestly, my gut reaction is there are probably things in a house that are worse for you than that. But just its location makes me less worried about it.
Most house wrap is a petrochemical product.
Petroleum based.
Yeah. The specific question I was going to ask, and this is something it annoys me, I guess, repeatedly when it comes to spray foam and spray foam installers. The claims that they make on the minimum depth required to put install spray foam. They claim all the time that, we need 8-inch, 2x8 cavity to do a ceiling and add it in the code. And I'm sitting there looking at the R value per inch, and I'm like, you're not even on the R30, and this is not continuous insulation. Definitely don't live in stuff.
That's a good question.
That is a really good question. So if you didn't hear, the question was basically how much thickness do you need? And a lot of the spray foam salespeople will tell you if you don't actually, especially for roofs, have to get quite to the R38 that's in the so I kind of come down both ways on that. In a wall, I really want you to just about fill a 2x6. Otherwise, don't bother foaming. I get people who build a 2x6 wall and then a foam installer will be like, you can just do 4 inches here. 4 inches of spray foam has about the same R value as fiberglass, and given that I'm going to make you install your fiberglass correctly anyway, give me 5.5 inches of fiberglass in that 2x6 wall and you'll actually be better off if it's properly installed.
And an installer trying to get 4 inches in a 2x6 cavity is going to fail.
So, in ceilings, however, I can see both sides of that argument. And the reason why is, so the R value of insulation is what's called conduction heat loss. It's how heat moves through that material. And there are some really tiny differences, but they're not big in conduction heat loss moving sideways out a wall or up through a ceiling. And people think, ceilings need a higher R value because heat rises, right? But that's actually air leakage, not conduction heat loss. So once you're using foam and the insulation itself is airtight, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to be as high as R38 on the roof and still code as R15 on walls. Like, that ratio is off. And It is what it is in the code for a few reasons. One reason is it's cheaper to put more insulation in a roof because you usually don't have to frame it differently. You got space up there. And same thing with floors. They can go up to R19 and the HBA isn't going to complain about the code because floors are usually at least a 2x10, you got room. But when walls get more insulation, that adds to cost. Builders don't want to do it. So the code has evolved that way. The other thing is, when you have a vented attic with like a flat ceiling with blown insulation, there's a whole bunch of reasons that blown insulation doesn't work right. So in a way, and none of them have to do with the R value, but in a way the code has just upped the R value as an easier way of trying to make up for why it doesn't work right. So I mentioned that fiberglass needs a hard surface on all sides. When you have blown attic insulation, you don't have a hard surface on the top. You're not decking all your attics. The top couple inches of that insulation isn't working right, so it's a throwaway. Wherever you have air leakage and it just leaks through that fiberglass, it's your fleece sweater effect again. So that's air leakage, it's not R value. Wherever you have an attic hatch and you're missing insulation around your can lights. So there's a lot of reasons why R38 fiberglass doesn't work particularly great in attics. Also, if you're doing a vented attic with fiberglass and you've got ductwork or HVAC up in the attic, all of its leakage and losses are to the outside. So if you move to a spray foam roof deck, the insulation itself is airtight, so you're losing less heat that way. It's more continuous. Your HVAC that's up there is now in conditioned space. It isn't losing anything. So I actually agree in the cases of spray foam at the roof that you can go lower than R38 and get equivalent performance to a blown.
But I've directly had spray foam installation companies say that, oh, a minimum of a 2x8 rafter, we can get a code compliant roof system. And it was all spray foam at 3.7.
They do it with the trade-off. Yeah, they do it with the trade-off.
Instead of prescriptive, they actually, the shooting model.
Yeah, and that's going to get harder to do in the new code, but it will still be possible. I'm okay with it. I tell people I want to see at least around 25 with spray foam, which is a filled 2x8. I think that's kind of the minimum. But that argument, so in the case of walls, that argument I think is garbage. In the case of roofs, it has some.
No, and I understand needing air sealing, using it.
But our value does still matter.
A quick note on the SIPs. It's probably the best solution for like a timber frame style or a timber frame hybrid, where you're doing TNG on the ceiling or exposed timbers, because that's the enclosed ceiling versus framing an attic and then filling it with something. So that's
if you're doing TNG on a ceiling, you've got to either foam the roof or do SIPs or something.
So
you cannot vent
or move to commercial ceiling on SIPs versus multiple layers of rigid board.
Well,
more install time for rigid board.
It's really about the R.
Yeah, I was saying, it's about the R value at that point.
SIPs if you've never done it before, so
I mean, again, if you're doing multiple layers of solid foam, you're creating the same thing.
But yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too into SIPs because they're kind of a niche material, and really, I think for today, the point to make is no, you don't have to do that. Depending on the house, a lot of people do spray foam. If you're building a house like the one from Jag that Rob showed, where the upper floors kind of build into the roof line, you almost have to. If you've got a real simple flat ceiling, there are ways to air seal that ceiling and do blown insulation. We've walked you through it for your specific house. Here's just some photos that illustrate this proper installation. So with fiberglass, something we're looking for that the code officials don't necessarily look for is that it's fluffed out to fill the whole cavity, front to back. Here it's split around wires. If it's paper faced, you want it to be face stapled instead of inset. So that, although if I pulled back that paper, it might look like garbage behind the paper because sometimes they do that. But you want it to look really neat and fluffy. Here's some bad fiberglass. It's compressed around these pipes and wires. It's inset staple. it's pushed in. You can see the sides of a lot of studs. This insulation in a floor, you always want floors to be pushed up to touch the subfloor above if they're fiberglass. This is probably a 2x10 with an R19 where it's hanging down. So, but here you can see it's pushed up. So either this is compressed or the whole thing's hanging down. Either way.
How do you get that up there? Those tiger teeth don't
Tiger
stick in
teeth.
they don't stick in the TGIs.
Well, this is why I really like to do R30 bats, because then your bat and your floor are the same depth. So yeah, they've got to either use tiger teeth or come up with something else. The worst is when you have an open web truss, because you've got 3.5 inches of structure. I would really like you to spray foam an open web truss. Fiberglass, you know, I'm supposed to make you do grade 1. I don't actually think a grade 1 is possible with fiberglass in an open web truss, so it can be all it's going to be, and it doesn't look great. Don, you've probably got some experience to share here.
Well, the TJIs, relative to 2x material, the space is wider. Is there a problem sticking nominal 16 on center insulation in a TJI 716?
I think they have other widths, but to be honest with you, I think the way I've seen it is it's like a 9. I think they make a 19, and then I think they end up compressing it a little. I don't love it. Yeah.
I go 15 on center, 15 on center, 23 or whatever it is.
Yeah, if it's too irregular, I start preferring. Yeah, I start preferring to see foam.
And I think that the bigger picture, I guess, what having a raider helps so much is really, this is in this picture here, you see the basement, there's living space above it, most likely. You really need to think about actually where is your envelope. And really, if you've got mechanical equipment down here in the basement, and you've got insulated slab, then really your envelope is the walls of those basement walls. So it opens up a bigger picture. It's like defining what your envelope is, and that's a big part of this process.
And I actually am a big fan of the superior walls that we talked about before, especially if the homeowner might finish the basement later. If you do superior walls, you as a builder are giving the homeowner a complete tight, insulated to code thermal envelope. And then they can mess around with drywall or whatever they want in the basement, but you've given them an envelope that's like to code and ready to go. So I'm a fan of those. They also, if you're going to use concrete, they use less concrete than like a poured concrete wall or some other kind of concrete wall. So there is some savings there.
Except the slab has to be poured into the concrete.
Well, you're going to have that with any concrete wall. Like if you do block or if you do poured concrete, you're still going to 4-inch slab. So unless you talk to Don, because he has ways to get away from any concrete. But yeah, there's not a difference with superior wall on this slab. Okay, energy efficient ductwork. Energy efficient ductwork is really important because air ducts are the way that a lot of conventional homes lose energy. If you have ducts in a vented unconditioned attic, in an unconditioned or vented crawl space, in a basement, less so. Even if you insulate the floor above, there's some reasons why in our climate you tend to recover energy from duct losses, but you may also be recovering some cruddy air from your basement that you don't want to breathe. Really, anytime the HVAC unit is outside the conditioned envelope, duct leakage matters. The estimates that you'll see published are that duct leakage is like 15% of your heating and cooling energy, but the truth is that's kind of an average, and some houses it's way higher, like 60%. And then some houses, Matt and I own a house in Montford that wasn't green certified, but it just happens to have all the ducts in conditioned space, so it's actually a pretty green house, just by accident because the duct leakage is all in conditioned space. And you can get comfort problems. So if you have a lot of duct leakage, you might not be getting the supply air you want to a space. I did a research project once where we did duct sealing, and we did homeowner surveys. And one of the first things we found in a house was that the duct to the living room had come disconnected in the crawl space, just blowing supply air into the crawl space. We hooked that back up, and the guy was like, I was able to knock my thermostat down 2 degrees in the wintertime because I had been jacking it up because my living room was cold. Now that I'm actually getting air in my living room, I can knock my thermostat back down. So comfort problems go along with this. This is one of those ways that these above code programs feed into code. We have been testing ducts longer. We've been requiring tighter ducts. And we get more reliable tests because we use a quality assured third party. So home energy raters, which is what Matt and I are, 10% of what we do is checked by somebody else in a paperwork way, and 1% of what we do is checked by somebody else then going out with equipment and redoing what we did. And if either of those processes find that we didn't do our job right, we can actually get sanctioned and eventually lose our ability to be home energy raters. If you're just building to code and your HVAC guy is testing, I've seen a lot of hinky results from HVAC guys. I think a lot of guys have the equipment and they don't actually know how it works because the numbers don't make any sense, and then I'll duplicate test it and I don't agree at all. And there's no quality assurance oversight on HVAC guys testing their own work.
Is there any difference in the green side if you use metal in the ductwork versus flares?
Yes, that question was about metal versus flex. There's no limitation on what you can use material-wise, and most people do use a combination of metal and flex. I like to at least see metal trunks with flex runouts. I don't love ductboard. I'd rather have those trunks and plenums be metal. But it's really about the sealing of it, and if it is outside conditioned space, also being insulated enough. So this just shows you some problem areas. Those air handler boxes, like your furnace cabinet or your heat pump, those leak like a sieve. So if that's in an attic or a crawl space, you're losing energy on the box. A lot of the time when we're working with new HVAC contractors, a big part of our challenge is just getting them to seal the box. Sealing flex to sheet metal where we have a connection. This is a boot, the little boot at the end of the duct that comes up through the floor. Sealing where that penetrates the subfloor, or then here's one in an attic where it penetrates the drywall ceiling, makes the ducts tighter and it makes the house tighter. If the attic or the crawl space are unconditioned. So you get kind of a double bang for your buck on your test results from sealing there. So related to tight ducts is an airtight home in general. This is the setup for a blower door test. So one of the tests we do is we come in, we put this big kind of tent thing in your door, and it's got a big fan in it, and we depressurize your house, and we see how much air it takes to do that. So I tell people it's kind of like blowing up a bike tire. If you've got a bike tire with no holes in it, you blow some air in and it tightens up right away, you get good pressure. If it's got holes in it, you keep blowing in air and it doesn't pressurize because that air leaks out. So we're trying to see how much air it takes to pressurize your house, basically. And then we normalize it to the size of your house because a bigger house is going to take more air to pressurize. The North Carolina code requires a score of less than 5 air changes at 50, or visual inspection. So there's like a checklist that you can sign saying, oh, I just visually looked at my air sealing, it's probably under 5, and that's it. And what's unfortunate is the thing that you sign doesn't even have the checklist that you're supposed to visually inspect on it. So very few code-built homes are even tested. Builders are generally just signing that form to get their CO. North Carolina Hero requires less than 4. That's the rebate that we mentioned. And that does have to be a third-party tested. Energy Star, if you certify that, actually doesn't have, it has a penalty, but there's no limit. So you could build a leaky house and get an Energy Star certified if you do other efficiency trade-offs, but that would be stupid because air sealing to less than 4 is not that hard. And a house that's leakier than that has a higher likelihood of moisture problems. The Green Built Homes program is similar to the NC Hero requirement. They measure it slightly differently, but we don't need to get into those weeds. I have Green Built Homes that regularly score less than 1.5 air changes 50. To get less than about 1 air change 50, you're going to start spending a lot of money and effort, but you can get down to 1.5 with a pretty reasonable set of things to do. Why build tight houses? Something builders say to me a lot is you can build a house too tight. A house needs to breathe. A house may need to breathe, but not in that way. You don't really want air moving through your building envelope in this climate because air carries a lot of moisture in this climate. So if air is moving through your walls and your roof and your floor, that moisture can condense at various times in your walls, your roof, and your floor. I also liked what Rob said, like, where's that air coming from? You know, how many, if you look at existing homes, how many attics and crawl spaces and basements do you want to be breathing air from? Garages that might be attached. I want to know where that air is coming from. So, the other thing that happens is if you build a leaky house, yeah, you're getting outside air, but you get more when the weather's severe. So you get the most when it's 0 degrees outside or when it's 100 degrees outside. And you get very little when it's milder. So it's not regular air that you can count on. Air leakage accounts to like 25 to 40% of heating and cooling in American homes, which is a lot. So there's a lot of savings there. It's way cheaper to bring in intentional ventilation air. And it brings in a lot of moisture and dust. And actually, sometimes I'm talking to people and I feel like they're just not really, this isn't impacting them. And I mentioned that these are big enough holes that things like mice and bugs can come in. And so, I mean, I see a fair amount of pests that come into houses through these same holes. So building tight houses is actually really important. Also in the energy efficiency category is your heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. So I just listed some types of systems that people use. Geothermal heat pumps generally happen in larger homes that want to do radiant floor. Ductless mini splits are kind of coming into their home. Generally for smaller homes with really open floor plans, you can make those work. High efficiency heat pumps, the standard heat pumps now have these higher efficiency variable speed versions that are real similar to a big ductless mini split, only with ducts. Furnaces still have their place, especially if you're on a generator or if you're going off grid. Natural gas boilers for radiant heat if you have natural gas available. I don't like to do radiant heat off propane because it just costs so much to do. But you know, here's some pictures. That's a geothermal system. That's a radiant floor. Both of those are my house. There's a ductless mini split with a wall-mounted unit on the wall. And then this is a house in West Asheville that was in Parade Homes that had a natural gas radiant heat boiler. Efficient hot water, you're also going to have to think about. It has a huge impact on house performance. Water heating is in the 20 to 25% range for overall energy performance. The heat pump or hybrid water heaters that Rob mentioned earlier are becoming a really popular choice. They look like a regular electric water heater with this little heat pump unit on the top. They basically suck heat out of your house and put it in your hot water. And when they do that, they dehumidify the space that they're in. So they're really great for basements. And if you package them into that Duke Whole House rebate, you can about pay for the water heater.
So something to know about that too is if you have a small mechanical space and a finished basement or like a weather strip sealed door, usually a small mechanical room doesn't have enough air or makeup air for this to work effectively, so then you have to have transfer grills so the air's communicating, which is a benefit. The pressure basement is drying out that moisture.
You can also duct them to an adjacent space or something like that. The one place where I really haven't been able to find a solution is if you have a short crawl space, nobody makes a low void. They're about 5 foot 6 inches tall. So you got to either dig out a corner or find a way to bring them upstairs. So geothermal, if you're doing that, there's a de-superheater. Gas tankless. I would say of the efficient options for water heating, the heat pump water heater and the gas tankless, which I probably, let's see the superheater there. So the gas tankless and the heat pump water heater, from a CO2 standpoint, are about equal in terms of CO2 emissions. If you have natural gas for the tankless, the operating cost is about equal. If you have propane, the propane tankless will cost more. You get a way better rebate for the heat pump water heater because the rebate comes from the electric company and they're not rebating you on gas appliances. So, so they're about equivalent. One thing I will mention is recirculation loops are getting more and more popular. Plumbers are trying to sell them like they're free because they're not doing them right. If you don't do them right, they're going to cost the homeowner $200 to $300 a year at least in energy bills. So there are ways to do a recirc loop right where they save both energy and hot water. That almost never happens automatically, and it is going to cost you more on the install. They're really getting pushed on houses that do not need a recirc loop, small houses. So be wary of the recirc loop. Yes,
And I'm surprised they did a natural gas option to compete with the heat pump water heater as far as carbon.
yeah, they're getting close.
Even at 100% efficiency for the natural gas, I don't think you can do it.
I mean, I can show you, and I'll show you the numbers. It may be that I think you're using a bit more efficient heat pump water heater than the average one.
Yeah, with the efficient performance of about 4.
Yeah, that's a little, on average, I'm seeing closer to 3, so that starts to bring them closer. Solar thermal, which is great, but it's become less popular just because it's got a lot of moving parts and maintenance, and combining a heat pump water heater with solar PV, which has less moving parts and maintenance, tends to be kind of a more popular package in the current incentive arena. But there's nothing wrong with solar thermal. I have it at my house. So we're coming down the home stretch here. Efficient appliances, Energy Star appliances. The closed washer is the most important one. Energy Star closed washers spin the clothes drier, so you actually save the energy on the drying. Dishwashers, pretty popular. Refrigerators, it's important to buy Energy Star, but honestly for refrigerators, just watch your kilowatt hours per year, because if you get a really big Energy Star fridge, it probably uses more energy than a small non-Energy Star fridge. And don't have too many. I see a lot of homes that have like 4 little half wine fridges around. Those half fridges use almost as much energy as a big fridge sometimes. So be careful on the number of refrigerators. Induction cooktops. I don't have time to tell you everything that I love about induction cooktops, but I will tell you cooking on gas is dead. There's not a single reason I can think of why cooking on gas is better. It's worse, it's more expensive. There's a whole cascade of expensive things that will happen to you if you use gas. If builders aren't going to talk homeowners out of gas and into induction cooktop, this is like the #1 most important thing you can try to talk your homeowners out of. You're doing them a massive favor. And LED or compact fluorescent lighting. LED is pretty much the mainstream these days, so those are good. This thing I still see a hate, although the trend is kind of going away.
They made enough LEDs.
They make LED versions of that Edison bulb. If you buy the incandescent Edison bulb, it actually uses twice the energy of a typical incandescent bulb, which uses 10 times the energy of an LED. So those are just a thumbs down. You can get a suntan under some of those things. They get so hot. And they burn out in like 2 months. So just get an LED version of it if you like it. Did I have a question?
I realize what time it was.
Yeah, I'm almost done. I don't want to miss the indoor air quality category because indoor air quality is really important. In that section, there are a lot of points for things that are related to moisture control because obviously that's a place where poor indoor air quality and damage to structures can often happen here. I'm going to have other slides after this about radon-resistant construction and whole house ventilation, so I'll skip those for now. I will mention one of the most important and easy tests we do is to test your kitchen and bath fans. Probably half the homes that we have a bath fan that isn't pulling as much air as it should be pulling. It's our most frequently failed thing. And if a bath fan isn't removing the moisture it should be removing, you've got a potential moisture callback. So that's actually a really easy but good thing that is getting done in green certified homes that is not getting done in other homes. And we get a lot of bath fans fixed that would just have never worked right. The combustion safety, which we mentioned before, there are a lot of problems with fireplaces not drawing well in newer, tighter homes. So having some rules about fireplaces is a good thing. In fact, Green Built could probably have even better rules. Termite treatments, so if you don't know, there are some low toxicity options like the trap and bait, or there's like a borate spray that's similar to the regular sprays but less toxic. And then low toxicity materials, finishes, and furnishings. So there's whole categories of things that if they're formaldehyde-free or low VOC, carb compliant is like a California compliance for low formaldehyde. So if you can buy things that are carb compliant, that are out there in the market, those are good. This is a picture of a sealed crawl space, which you don't have to do, but you get a lot of points for doing it because they are less prone to moisture problems. Whole house ventilation, given the time, I'm not going to say too much about it, other than we already talked about why your house needs to be tight. So now that your house is tight, we need to have a way to bring fresh air into the house. You can do that with a balance system like an energy or heat recovery ventilator. There are also some cheaper ways to do it, the most common of which is a whole house exhaust that runs continuously. So if you're a builder, this is something that if you start working with us, we will spend a lot of time talking about and making sure you have a strategy. Radon-resistant construction is most important in homes with slabs, basements, and sealed crawl spaces, but any house can have radon. And this is just getting a pipe under the slab and out the roof to passively vent radon from under your slab. Doing this is really smart here because we do have a lot of radon. And
Doing it after is really expensive.
Doing it after is really expensive. Green Built does require that you test your radon, and if it's high, you have to mitigate. If you do this passive system, you're less likely to test high, so it's really a good thing to do. Finally, sustainable materials. Again, there's lots of categories, but if things are resource efficient in some way, FSC certified Forest Stewardship Council, or engineered products that use smaller pieces of waste pieces of wood, if you do job site recycling, anything you do to enhance durability, so something won't need to be replaced right away, using recycled and salvaged component materials, renewable resources, universal design just means people's homes are more useful to them, so there are actually some points for ADA accessibility. And so that's the presentation. I've used up our time, but I think Rob and I can stick around for a few minutes. And actually, my partner Matt over here knows everything that I know about the Green Built program. So if you want to grab Matt, he's also a great resource.
And thank you guys for spending the afternoon with us.